I was driving back home from my cousin's house on the 4th of July last year. It's about a 30-minute drive, which isn't too bad if you ask me. It is totally worth seeing my family and being able to feast on whatever my cousin makes for dinner. I had a great time there and everything went well. The food was amazing, just like it always was, and I loved being able to see my family. So it was just your average 4th of July, or actually, maybe not so much because something horrible happened to me on my way home from leaving my cousin's on my way to my cousin's house. Just about as soon as I got into the car and started heading that way, I realized I was really low on fuel and that I should probably stop and get some gas. I was feeling lazy, so I decided I was just going to wait and get some gas at a gas station nearby my cousin's house. I don't know why, but it must have completely slipped my mind because I had forgotten that I was supposed to get gas when I got close to my cousin's. It wasn't until I arrived at my cousin's house that I realized I had totally forgotten to get gas. It's okay, I thought to myself. I'll just get gas first thing when I leave on my way home. I was sure I had at least 20 miles before I ran completely out of fuel, and there is a gas station maybe only 5 miles away. I had an old 1995 beat-up Ford F-150 that had been put through hell by its last 2 previous owners, with over 200,000 miles on it. And I guess the fuel gauge wasn't as accurate as I thought it would be, because on my way home, my truck completely stalled. I tried to call my cousin, but I wasn't getting any service. She lived kind of in the middle of nowhere, and I was even more in the middle of nowhere now. It felt like being parked on the side of the road, with no means of transportation other than my own 2 feet, and with no way of calling anyone. I was quite desperate. Luckily, I had a gas can in the back of my pickup. Of course, it didn't have gas, but it was good that I had it because with that at least, I could walk up to the nearest gas station, fill it up with gas, and then walk back to the truck, fill the truck up, and then I would be on my way. It was pretty late though, and it was dark, and there were not many houses around, so it was really creepy. I must have had a 2-mile walk, I estimated. Maybe after 10 minutes of walking, the truck rolls up behind me. Good old truck broke down on you, huh? Hey, buddy, why don't you hop in? I'll take you to the gas station. No thank you, sir, I said. I politely declined, but the man seemed to take offense to it. Are you kidding me? You're just gonna walk off when I'm offering you a ride? What do you think I'm going to do? Try and hurt you or something? He asked. No. You see, he cut me off and said, just get in the truck. Unless you really want to walk another 30 minutes to the gas station and at least 45 minutes back. I could have you back here to your truck in less than 10 minutes, he said. Somehow he convinced me to get in the truck. Man, I really wish I never would have, though because I almost had a terrible experience that night. My cousin lived in a nice area, but they had been hearing things in the news about people going missing lately, so I was really skeptical about it. This man wouldn't take no for an answer, and I was feeling really lazy. He did a really good job at convincing me to get in because I went against my gut feeling, which I never do. When I got in the truck, he was reassuring me that he wasn't just some weirdo, and that he really just felt like doing a good deed because he had nothing better to do anyways. That made me feel a bit better for a brief moment, but it didn't take long before I realized something was terribly wrong. I couldn't even make out what he was saying anymore. He started mumbling to himself over and over, and I asked if he was okay, but he didn't answer me. Only a minute or so after that, he drove right past the gas station where we were supposed to be stopping at. Hey man, you passed a gas station, I said. That's when he looked at me directly in my eyes and said, You don't make the rules here. I do now. Shut your mouth if you want everything to be okay. I'm going to tell you right now that you're going to do everything I say, or things are going to end very badly for you. I started freaking out and screaming at him to pull over and let me out. He was screaming at me, telling me to shut up over and over again. I tried to open the door, and my plan was that I was going to jump out when he started slowing down, like towards a turn or a stop sign, but I couldn't get the door opened, and I couldn't see to find the door handle because it was so dark. I realized that the door had been rigged and tampered in such a way that you could only open it from the outside. Luckily, I kept pepper spray on me for protection. I knew it was risky to pepper spray someone while they were driving, but clearly I was running out of options. I sprayed him, and then we started swerving. I tried to steer the wheel the best I could to make sure that when we stopped or crashed, I'd be as safe as possible. I braced myself the best I could, and we crashed right into a ditch, straight into a small tree. I hit my head on the passenger window pretty hard, and I felt a bit disoriented for a moment. When I became fully aware of what was going on again, I started panicking even more. Luckily, the man was knocked out cold, and I was able to crawl over him and get out of the driver's side door. I grabbed my gas can and ran as fast as I could for like a mile back to that gas station where we were supposed to stop at and get gas. I ran all the way there without stopping for a single breath. I was really out of shape at the time, and I've never run like that in my life, but you'd be surprised at what you're capable of when your survival instinct kicks in. When I got there, I told the cashier what was going on and that I needed to use a phone to call the police. The police showed up in a matter of minutes and drove me back to my car. They made sure I didn't need medical assistance before letting me go on my way. I gave the best description to the police that I could and hoped it would help them find the man. Apparently the truck was still there, but he was gone. The truck he was in was actually stolen, so they still have no idea who he was. I really hope they find him, though. Don't miss out on the bone-chilling thrills. Subscribe now and prepare to be haunted by the horrors that await. This incident took place during the holiday season of 2018. Back then, I was in college, and because the campus was so close to my parents' home, I just lived with them to save money on rent. Ever since I was a kid, every holiday season, my parents would take our family on a 2-hour drive to a neighboring state to visit extended family. Their plan was to leave Friday morning, but because I had school, I had to drive myself down later that night, and that's what I ended up doing. I'd say it was around 8 p.m. when I left, so at that time of year, it was almost completely dark outside. Anyway, I was driving down the highway, which should be noted was almost completely deserted. There wasn't much civilization on the route I was taking. I remember going for around an hour when my car started making weird noises. I honestly just tried to ignore it because the car was old, so it would occasionally do that. But eventually it started slowing down. I literally put the pedal to the floor, but it didn't do anything. That's when my heart dropped, realizing I was out of fuel. I meant to fill up on my way back from school, but completely forgot. And like a lot of other things on the car, the fuel gauge was broken, so I had no reminder. Only about a 20-minute walk away was a small town that I knew for a fact had a 24-hour gas station, so I guess things could have been worse. I started my walk, and when I finally made it there, I quickly bought a container, filled it up, and started walking back. Fast forward another 20-minute walk, and I made it back to my car. I filled it up and got inside. But right as I started my car, the headlights revealed some man maybe 50 feet in front of me. Like no car, just this guy that came from the exact same direction as I had only a couple of minutes ago. When he got to my car, he started making a hand signal to tell me to roll down my window. Now, my first instinct was to drive off, but he was standing in front of my car, and I didn't want to hurt the guy. So, I rolled down my window only an inch to hear what he had to say, and possibly get him to move just enough for me to drive off without hitting him. But no, he stayed right by my car. He then asked me if I could give him a ride as his car had broken down just up the road. But I knew for a fact this was most likely a lie. I had just walked from that direction, and I didn't see any broken down car. I responded saying, sorry man, I gotta get going. There was silence for a bit, until the guy went on about feeling tired, and if I could at least give him some water or something. I told him sure, and reached over to my glove box where I keep extra waters. Like I expected, he moved closer to my window and now off my car. Figuring this might be my only opportunity to get away, I hit the gas and sped out of there. As I was pulling away, I heard an ear-deafening scraping sound on the side of my car. Along with this, the guy started chasing my car for a bit until giving up. Most disturbing, though, was the fact that nowhere on the side of the road was a broken-down car. I firmly believe that man had followed me on my walk from the gas station back to my own car. When I finally made it to my cousin's house, I got out and noticed the entire side of my car had been scraped by what looked like a knife or some sort of sharp object. Ultimately, I reported the incident to the police, but as far as I know, nothing ever came of it. When I was younger, each summer and almost every Christmas, my family would pack the car and go on a road trip to visit family in Canada. We never had any problems until one particular trip when I was 8. Like every road trip before, we left our home in Southern California around 6 p.m. to reach our destination the next morning. So, around 2 a.m., we crossed into Canada, and that's when things got weird. When you're on the only stretch of freeway in the middle of the forest, you don't tend to freak out about having the same car behind you for miles. It was practically pitch black outside, our car windows, the only visible shapes being the dotted stars and the eerie silhouettes of the towering trees. We'd been in Canada for about an hour and still had a few more hours to drive. I remember sleeping but still being semi-conscious of what was around me because I didn't have the skill to really fall asleep in a car. So, when my mother suddenly spoke my dad's name, I heard her. "John, that car behind us. It's been behind us since we left Vancouver." My dad peeked at the car and shrugged off my mom's tension. "A lot of cars use this road. He's probably going to Edmonton or another city," he said. Despite his sureness, my mom kept a weary eye on the car behind us. But this time, my siblings and I were hyper-aware of the car and entertained ourselves with watching it through the gaps in the luggage that blocked the rear window. We got tired pretty quickly. "He's getting closer," my mother noted. We turned to watch as the car inched closer and closer to ours. "He's too close, John." And she was right. By this time, the car was practically pressed against the rear of our car. On a lonely stretch of highway in the middle of nowhere, with another few hours until daylight, it was downright scary. We couldn't do much. My dad didn't slow down, didn't stop, and he didn't speed away either. He just drove, and the car followed. The next 30 minutes were the most tense that we had ever experienced. The car would ease up sometimes, only to depress its blinding headlights against our rear once more, like he knew he was freaking us out and enjoying it. It was during one of the periods that the car had pulled away that my mom spotted a police car up ahead, parked on the side of the road. She didn't miss a beat. "Pull over right in front of the police. Pull over right now, John." And he did. I wonder how confused the policeman must have been when he watched my dad park our car right in front of him. The police came over and asked what was wrong, and my mother urgently told him everything. The car, the way it followed us and taunted us. The police took her claims seriously and told us about how people were victimized and had their cars stolen on these empty highways by thugs and criminals. Then he offered to drive behind us for a little while to make us feel safe. We drove off with the police cruiser behind us, relieved until about 10 minutes later, when we saw something that confirmed the policeman's words and my mother's worst fears. 10 minutes later, we saw the same car pulled over on the side of the road, waiting.